The day my friends heard I was struggling, they stopped returning my calls, but they didn't know I'd invested $8.3 million in crypto 2 years ago. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I'm going to tell you about the most devastating betrayal of my life and how I turned it into the sweetest victory I've ever tasted. Before I begin, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with all of you. It started on a Tuesday morning in September 2019. I was sitting in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, staring at my phone. The same phone that used to buzz constantly with messages from my so-called friends. Now, silent as a tomb. I'd sent 12 texts over the past week, not one response. My best friend of 30 years, Vivian, had seen every single message. The little read receipts told me so, but she didn't reply. That's it. You see, 3 months earlier, I'd made what everyone thought was the biggest mistake of my life. My husband Richard had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. We'd been married for 42 years. He was my everything. And in my grief, I made a decision that shocked everyone who knew me. I sold our family home in the suburbs, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial where we'd raised our 3 children, where we'd hosted countless dinner parties and holiday gatherings, where Richard had built a workshop in the garage and spent weekends crafting furniture. I sold it for $1.2 million and moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment downtown. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. My children were concerned, but supportive. They understood I couldn't bear to live in that house without their father. Every corner held a memory that pierced my heart. But my friends? They whispered behind my back. I heard through the grapevine that they were calling me unstable, saying grief had made me irrational. Then came the second shock. I told them I was investing most of my money, not in stocks or bonds or certificates of deposit like a sensible widow should. No, I was putting it into something they'd barely heard of, cryptocurrency. The reactions were immediate and brutal. Vivian cornered me at our weekly book club meeting. "Catherine, this is insane," she hissed, pulling me aside. "You're going to lose everything. These crypto things are a scam. You need to talk to a financial advisor, someone professional." Her husband, Martin, was even more direct. "You're being taken advantage of," he said flatly. "Whoever convinced you to do this is either stupid or criminal." But here's what none of them knew, what I hadn't told a single soul. Richard hadn't just been a high school history teacher who retired at 65. For the last 15 years of his career, he'd been obsessively studying emerging technologies and finance. He'd filled notebooks with research about blockchain technology and digital currencies. He'd made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd take a portion of our savings and invest it exactly as he'd outlined in a letter he'd left me. So I did. In November 2019, I invested $8.3 million, not just the money from selling the house, but our entire life savings, Richard's pension payout, everything. And then I waited. Nobody knew about the $8.3 million. Not my children, not my friends, not even my sister. Richard had been incredibly private about our finances. Most people assumed we lived comfortably on his teacher's pension and my part-time income from the bookstore where I'd worked for years. They had no idea that Richard had inherited a substantial sum from his parents, or that he'd been a genius at investing throughout our marriage. The modest lifestyle we'd maintained wasn't because we had to. It was because Richard believed in living below our means. "The truly wealthy don't advertise it, Kathy," he used to say. "They protect it." So when I moved into that small apartment and talked about being careful with money after his death, everyone assumed I was struggling. And that's when everything changed. Vivian stopped inviting me to the monthly dinners at her country club. "I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable," she said. The one time she actually answered my call. "I know the membership fees there can be, well, I wouldn't want you to feel like you couldn't keep up." Keep up. I'd been a member of that club longer than she had. Richard and I had enjoyed countless evenings there, but I let it go. I told myself she was being thoughtful, not cruel. Then came Thanksgiving. For 28 years straight, I'd hosted Thanksgiving dinner for our entire friend group. 12 to 15 people all gathered around our dining room table, laughing and sharing stories. It was tradition. It was sacred. But that November, nobody called to ask what they could bring. Nobody asked what time to arrive. When I finally reached Linda, another member of our group, she was painfully awkward. "Oh, Catherine, we just assumed. I mean, with your new situation, we're doing Thanksgiving at Vivian's this year. Didn't she tell you?" She hadn't told me, and I wasn't invited. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and crying. My children were scattered across the country with their own families, their own traditions. I'd insisted they not change their plans for me. I'll be fine, I'd promised them. I have my friends. But I didn't have my friends. Not anymore. December was worse. Our group had a tradition of going to see the Nutcracker Ballet every year, followed by dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. I saw the photos on Facebook. All of them smiling, dressed up, holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "Annual Nutcracker Tradition with the Best Ladies." I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been invited. Nobody had even mentioned it. When I commented on the post, "Looks beautiful. Wish I could have joined," the response was deafening silence. Not a single person liked my comment or replied to it. The next day, I noticed Vivian had deleted my comment entirely. That's when I understood. This wasn't thoughtlessness or awkward charity. This was intentional. I had become an embarrassment to them, a cautionary tale. Poor Catherine, who'd lost her mind after losing her husband. Poor Catherine, who'd thrown away her financial security on some internet scam. Poor Catherine, who dragged herself down from their social class. They'd decided I was no longer worth their time. January 2020 brought a new level of cruelty. I ran into Patricia, another longtime friend, at the grocery store. I was genuinely happy to see her, relieved to have a chance for a real conversation. "Patricia," I called out, waving from the produce section. She saw me. I know she saw me because her eyes met mine for a split second. Then she literally turned her cart around and walked the other way. My heart sank into my stomach. I stood there holding a bag of apples, feeling like I'd been slapped. But the worst was yet to come. In February, my daughter Emily called me upset. "Mom, I don't know how to tell you this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "I just got off the phone with Vivian." Apparently, Vivian had called Emily expressing concern about my mental state. She'd suggested that Emily might want to consider having me evaluated because my recent decisions showed clear signs of deteriorating judgment. She'd even mentioned something about power of attorney, about how Emily should protect me from myself before I lost everything. I was furious. I was humiliated. But more than that, I was hurt beyond words. These women had been my closest friends for decades. We'd supported each other through divorces, illnesses, the loss of parents. Vivian had held my hand through my mother's funeral. I'd been there when Patricia's son went through rehab. We'd shared our deepest fears and greatest joys. Or so I thought. Apparently, that friendship had conditions I'd never known about. Apparently, it only existed as long as I maintained a certain status, a certain lifestyle, a certain net worth that made me acceptable to be seen with. The isolation was crushing. I'd wake up each morning and reach for my phone out of habit, then remember there was no point. No messages would be waiting. No lunch plans to confirm. No funny memes shared between friends. Nothing. I threw myself into other things. I volunteered at the library. I took up watercolor painting. I joined a yoga class where nobody knew me, where I could be anonymous. But the loneliness followed me everywhere. I'd see groups of women laughing together over coffee and feel a physical ache in my chest. My children tried to help. Emily flew in for a week in March, right before the pandemic hit. "Mom, forget those women," she said firmly. "If they can't see your worth, that's their problem, not yours." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like my problem. It felt like something was fundamentally wrong with me. I questioned everything. Had I been a bad friend all those years? Had I done something terrible without realizing it? Had our entire friendship been a lie from the start? The pandemic lockdowns actually came as a relief. At least now everyone was isolated. At least now I had an excuse for being alone. Nobody could see that I had nowhere to go, no one to call. The whole world stopped. And for me, it had already stopped months ago. But through all of this, I kept checking my crypto portfolio every single day. By May 2020, something was happening. The numbers on my screen were growing. Not slowly, not modestly, but exponentially. The $8.3 million I'd invested was now worth $11.4 million. I sat in my apartment, barely breathing, watching the figures climb. Richard's research had been impeccable. He predicted this. In his letter, he'd written, "There will be a global event that disrupts traditional finance. I don't know what it will be or exactly when, but when it comes, digital currency will surge. Trust me, Kathy. Trust the research. Hold steady and don't sell." The pandemic was that event. As governments printed money and traditional markets became volatile, cryptocurrency exploded in value, and I was positioned perfectly, but I told no one. I lived in my modest apartment, bought my groceries, wore my regular clothes, and watched my friends' lives continue on social media without me. Vivian posted pictures from her lake house. Patricia showed off her new luxury SUV. Linda shared photos of elaborate dinner parties she was hosting now that restrictions had eased. None of them checked on me. Not once. Not even a simple text asking how I was doing during a global pandemic. The silence was absolute. In August 2020, my portfolio hit $17.2 million. I started having trouble sleeping, not from worry, but from the sheer surreal nature of what was happening. I'd sit at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, coffee growing cold beside me, just staring at the numbers. That's when I had an idea, a delicious, slightly wicked idea. I reached out to a private investigator. I need information on 3 people, I told him, providing the names of Vivian, Patricia, and Linda. I want to know about their finances, their businesses, anything public record. What he found was illuminating. Vivian's husband Martin's law practice was struggling badly. They'd taken out a second mortgage on their home. Patricia's boutique clothing store was hemorrhaging money and on the verge of closing. Linda's husband had made some catastrophic investment decisions, and they were quietly trying to sell assets before anyone noticed. They were all struggling, all of them. The country club memberships, the fancy dinners, the luxury cars. It was all a facade. They were desperately clinging to the appearance of wealth while their finances crumbled. And here I was, in my small apartment, quietly sitting on a fortune that dwarfed anything they'd ever had. September brought a text. Finally, after almost a year of silence, my phone buzzed with Vivian's name. My heart actually jumped before I opened it. Catherine, I heard about a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with old friends. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee? I stared at that message for a long time. She'd heard about an opportunity? What opportunity? Why now, after all this time? I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to see if there would be more. The next day, Patricia texted, "I've been thinking about you. We should get together soon." Then Linda, "Miss you, friend. Let's catch up." All within 48 hours. All with the same artificial warmth. All completely transparent. Something had changed, and I needed to know what. I agreed to meet Vivian for coffee. I chose the place, a small independent cafe near my apartment. Nothing fancy. I wanted to see what she was really after. She arrived 15 minutes late, which had always been her way of establishing dominance. She was dressed impeccably as always. Designer handbag, expensive jewelry, perfect makeup. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Catherine, you look well," she said, though her tone suggested surprise, as if she'd expected to find me broken and disheveled. We ordered coffee and made small talk about the weather, about the pandemic, about nothing important. Then she got to the point. "I wanted to apologize," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I've been a terrible friend this past year. I got so caught up in my own life, and I feel awful about it." I pulled my hand back gently. "It's been 14 months, Vivian. Not a single call." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know, and I'm truly sorry. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." She paused, taking a delicate sip of her latte. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. An investment opportunity." There it was. I kept my face neutral. "Oh?" "Martin's firm is putting together a group investment in commercial real estate. It's a sure thing, Catherine. Guaranteed returns. And I immediately thought of you." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "I know things have been tight for you since Richard passed, and I thought this could be a way for you to rebuild your nest egg. You'd only need to invest $50,000 to start." Only $50,000, as if that wasn't an astronomical sum for the struggling widow she assumed I was. Oh, I let the silence hang between us. "That's very thoughtful," I said finally, "but I don't have $50,000 to invest." Her face fell just for a second before she rearranged it into sympathetic concern. "Of course, I understand. Well, even $20,000 would get you in at a basic level. Vivian, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not in a position to invest in anything right now." The mask slipped further. I could see calculation in her eyes, reassessing whether this coffee was worth her time. Right, well, if your situation changes, before I could take a moment to think about this interaction, if you're finding this story compelling, please hit that subscribe button. It helps me continue sharing these real experiences with all of you. We finished our coffee with strained conversation, and she excused herself quickly. I have a hair appointment, she said, though I noticed her checking her phone constantly, as if hoping for something more important. Over the next week, Patricia and Linda both reached out with similar opportunities. Patricia wanted me to invest in her failing boutique, just a small amount to help us expand, she said sweetly. Linda's husband needed investors for his new venture. It's a chance to get in on the ground floor. They hadn't missed me. They hadn't felt guilty. They'd smelled money somewhere and were casting a wide net, hoping I might have some scraps to throw their way. By December 2020, my portfolio had reached $23.8 million. I could barely comprehend the number. I'd started with $8.3 million, and in just over a year, it had nearly tripled. Richard's research had been genius, pure genius. I hired a wealth management attorney, someone with no connections to Portland, someone who'd never heard of me or my former friends. I need advice on asset protection and strategic financial planning, I told her. Her name was Jennifer Cow, and she was brilliant. Mrs. Walsh, she said during our first meeting, with this level of wealth, you need to be very careful. People will come out of the woodwork when they sense money. They already have, I told her, and explained about my former friends. She smiled knowingly. Let me ask you something. What do you want to do with this wealth? What would bring you satisfaction? I thought about that question for days. What did I want? Revenge seemed petty. Simply walking away and living well seemed insufficient. These women had hurt me deeply, had discarded me when they thought I was worthless, and now were circling back hoping to use me. Then it came to me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted them to face the truth about who they were and what they'd done, and I wanted to help people who genuinely needed it. I started researching local charities, organizations that helped women escaping domestic violence, programs that provided financial literacy education to low-income families, scholarships for first-generation college students, food banks, homeless shelters. I made anonymous donations, substantial ones, $100,000 here, $250,000 there. It felt incredible. Every donation was like medicine for my wounded soul. This was what wealth should be used for, not country club memberships and designer handbags, but changing lives. In January 2021, Vivian called me again. Not texted, actually called. Catherine, I need to talk to you about something important. We met at the same cafe. This time she was on time and she looked stressed. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the worry lines around her eyes. I'm going to be honest with you, she said, which meant she was about to lie or manipulate. Martin's practice is in trouble. Real trouble. We might lose the house. Her voice cracked convincingly. I know we haven't been close lately, and that's my fault entirely. But I'm desperate, Catherine. I'm asking for a loan. $100,000. We'll pay you back with interest, I promise. I let her finish her rehearsed speech. Then I asked, why me, Vivian? You haven't spoken to me in over a year except to ask for money. You excluded me from every gathering. You deleted my comments on social media. You called my daughter, suggesting I was mentally incompetent. Why would you think I'd help you now? She had the audacity to look wounded. That's not fair. I made mistakes, yes, but we've been friends for 30 years. Doesn't that count for something? Does it? I asked softly, because from where I'm sitting, it only seems to count when you need something from me. She tried tears next. They might have been real. Please, Catherine, I'm begging you. No, I said simply. Her face transformed. The mask came completely off. You know what? Vivian hissed, her voice low and venomous. You've always been jealous of me. Always. You lived in Richard's shadow your whole life, playing the supportive little wife. Now you're bitter and alone, and you're taking it out on people who actually succeeded. I stood up calmly. I'm not bitter, Vivian. I'm just not your safety net. You threw me away when you thought I had nothing to offer. You don't get to pick me back up when you need something. I walked out of that cafe with my head high. Behind me, I heard her say say loudly enough for others to hear. Some people forget where they came from. But I knew exactly where I came from, and I knew exactly where I was going. Over the next few months, the calls and texts increased, all 3 of them, plus a few other peripheral friends I'd had over the years, suddenly remembered I existed. Each one had a sob story, a crisis, an urgent need. Each one assumed I was barely scraping by and hit me up for what they thought were small amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. To each one, I said no, and to each one, I explained exactly why. I reminded them of every exclusion, every deleted comment, every ignored text. I held up a mirror to their behavior, and they hated what they saw. Some got angry, like Vivian. Others tried manipulation. Patricia actually showed up at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom at 9 in the evening. "Catherine, please, just talk to me. 5 minutes. I didn't buzz her up. "Patricia, go home." "Whoa, I'm losing my business. Don't you care?" "I cared when I was losing my husband." "Where were you then?" "Oh, right. You were across the street from me at the grocery store, walking away." The intercom went silent. Linda tried a different approach. She sent a long email detailing all the good times we'd shared, painting a picture of our friendship that bore no resemblance to how she'd actually treated me. She ended with, "I know you have a good heart, Catherine. I know you'll do the right thing and help me." I replied with a single line, "I am doing the right thing. The answer is no." By summer 2021, my portfolio had grown to $31.2 million. The crypto market was on a historic bull run, and everything Richard had predicted was coming true. I could have sold then, taken my profits, and disappeared into a life of luxury. But I wasn't done yet. I started making plans, real plans. I met with Jennifer Cow weekly. "I want to establish a foundation," I told her, "a charitable foundation focused on supporting women who've been abandoned by their support systems, women going through divorce, widows, women escaping abuse. I want to fund job training, housing assistance, counseling services, everything they need to rebuild their lives." Jennifer smiled. "That's beautiful, Catherine." "And the name?" "The Richard Walsh Foundation for Abandoned Women," I said, "in memory of my husband, who taught me that real wealth is measured by what you give and not what you keep." We started the paperwork immediately. The foundation launched in October 2021 with an initial endowment of $10 million. That still left me with over $20 million in personal assets, more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. The foundation's mission statement was clear: to support women who have been abandoned by their communities in times of crisis, and to provide resources for rebuilding independent, dignified lives. We made our first grants in November, a $500,000 donation to a women's shelter that had been struggling to stay open, a $300,000 scholarship fund for widows returning to school, a $200,000 grant to a job training program specifically for women over 50 who'd been out of the workforce. The local newspaper picked up the story. "Anonymous donor establishes major foundation for women in need," the headline read. The article detailed the foundation's mission and first grants, but respected my request for privacy. I was listed only as the surviving spouse of educator Richard Walsh. That article ran on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone started ringing. Vivian called first. "Catherine, I just saw the article about a foundation in Richard's name. How wonderful that someone is doing this. Did you contribute?" I almost laughed. She still had no idea. "Why are you calling, Vivian?" "Well, I was thinking, since you were married to Richard, maybe you could put in a word with whoever runs this foundation. Martin and I could really use some assistance, and technically, I could qualify since I'm a woman in need and—" "Goodbye, Vivian." I hung up. Patricia texted, "Did you see the article about Richard's foundation? Someone donated $10 million. Can you imagine having that kind of money?" Linda messaged, "Wow, apparently there are still good people in the world with money, unlike some people we know who have no compassion for struggling friends." That last one stung, even though I knew it was manipulative nonsense. Linda was actually implying that I, the woman she thought was broke, had no compassion because I wouldn't give her money I didn't have. I decided it was time for phase 2 of my plan. I arranged a lunch, not at a cafe this time, but at the country club where I'd maintained my membership throughout everything. The same country club where Vivian had stopped inviting me because she thought I couldn't afford it. I invited all 3 of them, Vivian, Patricia, and Linda. The text I sent was simple. "I'd like to discuss the foundation that was established in Richard's name. I have information that might interest you. Please join me for lunch at the club next Tuesday at noon. My treat. They all responded within minutes. Of course they did. They smelled opportunity. That Tuesday, I dressed carefully. Not my usual casual style, but elegantly. I wore the diamond earrings Richard had given me for our 40th anniversary, the ones I'd kept in a safe deposit box. I had my hair professionally styled. I looked like the wealthy woman I actually was, and I did it intentionally. When I walked into the club's dining room, I saw their faces, confusion first, then calculation. How could I afford this? What was happening? I greeted them warmly and guided them to the private dining room I'd reserved, the one with the door that closed. We sat down, made small talk while the waiter poured water and took our orders. They were all nervous, I could tell, unsure of what this meeting was about, unsure of how to act around me now that I was clearly not the struggling widow they'd imagined. Once we were alone, I began. "Thank you for coming," I said pleasantly. "I wanted to talk to you about the Richard Walsh Foundation for Abandoned Women. It's such a wonderful cause," Vivian jumped in. "Richard would be so proud that someone is honoring his memory this way." "He would be," I agreed. "That's actually why I established it." The silence that fell over the table was profound. 3 faces stared at me with identical expressions of shock. "You?" Patricia finally managed. "But how did I get $10 million to start a foundation?" I smiled. "Well, that's an interesting story. You see, when Richard died, he left me specific instructions. He'd been researching cryptocurrency for years. He was fascinated by the technology, the potential. He left me detailed notes on exactly what to invest in and when." Linda's mouth was literally hanging open. "In November 2019, I invested $8.3 million in cryptocurrency following Richard's research precisely. That was our entire life savings, his pension payout, everything we had, plus the money from selling the house." Vivian found her voice. $8 million? But you said... "We all thought, you all assumed," I corrected. "You assumed that because I moved to a modest apartment and talked about being careful with money, I must be poor. You never asked. You just decided I'd fallen from your social class and you dropped me like I meant nothing." I pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio. The current balance read $34.7 million. I turned the screen to face them. That $8.3 million is now worth almost $35 million. Richard was right about everything, the pandemic, the surge in digital currency, all of it. Patricia's face had gone white. Linda looked like she might be sick. Vivian's expression cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been grudging respect. "So while you 3 were excluding me from dinners and deleting my comments and suggesting to my daughter that I was mentally incompetent, I was sitting on one of the most successful investments of the decade." I kept my voice calm, factual. "And when your finances started falling apart, you came crawling back, didn't you? Not because you missed me, not because you cared about me, but because you needed money." "Catherine, we didn't know," Linda started. "That's the point," I interrupted. "You didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You made assumptions based on appearances and treated me accordingly. You showed me exactly what our friendship was worth to you. Nothing, less than nothing." Vivian rallied first. "So what? You brought us here to gloat? To show off your money?" "No," I said. "I brought you here to give you a choice." I slid 3 envelopes across the table, one in front of each of them. Inside each envelope is a check for $100,000. Their eyes widened. Hope flickered across their faces. "There's a condition," I continued. "The money is not for you," I said clearly. "It's in each of your names, but it must be donated to the Richard Walsh Foundation within 30 days. If you cash these checks for personal use, I will pursue legal action for fraud. But if you donate them to the foundation, they'll be tax-deductible gifts in your names, and the money will go to help women who've been genuinely abandoned and need support." I watched their faces carefully. "You can be part of something good," I continued. "You can be associated with this foundation as donors and supporters. You can tell your social circles that you're philanthropists helping vulnerable women, or you can refuse, walk away, and I'll donate the money anonymously in your place." Vivian struggled for words. "This is humiliating, is it?" I asked. "Being offered a chance to support charity? Or is the humiliating part realizing that I have the power to help you and I'm choosing not to? That I'm offering you a way to save face in your community, but not a way to save your finances?" Patricia picked up her envelope with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I'm giving you the same choice you gave me." I said simply. You can be part of something meaningful, or you can walk away. The difference is, I'm actually giving you an option. You just cut me off completely. Linda spoke up, her voice small. We were terrible to you. Yes, I agreed. You were. I'm sorry, she whispered. And unlike the fake apologies before, this one sounded real. I appreciate that, I said. But sorry doesn't rebuild a year and a half of loneliness. Sorry doesn't erase what you showed me about who you really are. Vivian stood up abruptly. I don't need your charity, Catherine. Keep your money. She left her envelope on the table and walked out. Patricia and Linda stayed. Patricia looked at her envelope, then at me. I'll donate it, she said quietly. And Catherine, I know it doesn't mean much now, but I am genuinely sorry. We treated you horribly, and we don't deserve your grace in even offering us this. Linda nodded, tears in her eyes. We lost a real friend because we were shallow and cruel. I'll donate mine too. I nodded. Thank you. They left shortly after, subdued and reflective. I sat alone in that private dining room for a while, feeling lighter than I had in 2 years. The Richard Walsh Foundation is thriving now. We've helped over 300 women rebuild their lives. I've made new friends through volunteer work, genuine friendships based on shared values rather than social status. My children are proud of what I've built in their father's name. As for Vivian, Patricia, and Linda did donate the money, and they've kept their distance since, which is fine with me. Vivian never cashed her check, which expired after 60 days. I donated that $100,000 in her name anyway. Richard once told me that the measure of wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you do when you have it. I finally understand what he meant. I may have lost friends I thought I had, but I gained something far more valuable. The knowledge of who I really am and what truly matters. And that's worth more than $35 million could ever buy.